Welcome to the gas station where nightmares never run on empty. Here, shadows don't just linger, they stalk. Tonight, another terrifying tale awaits. But before we begin, remember, those who dare to subscribe may just survive the horrors yet to come. Will you take the risk? Story number 1 by Thomas. Let me tell you about the night I stopped believing in coincidences, or safety for that matter. It was last summer, middle of July, and I was driving through Ohio heading to Indianapolis. Work trip, nothing fancy. I decided to take the scenic route because highways are boring, right? Big mistake. The day was fine. Blue skies, good tunes, and coffee strong enough to keep me from dozing off. But then, as night rolled in, my dashboard lit up. Low fuel. Perfect timing. My phone had no signal, of course, but it had cached the nearest gas station about 10 miles away, off the main road. Now, normally, I'd just keep going, risk it. But this was one of those stretches of road where next gas station could mean 50 miles. So, I turned off onto this creepy little side road. After winding through what felt like endless woods, I finally saw it. A small beat-up gas station called Haven Fuel. Right off the bat, this place screamed, "Don't stop here." The neon sign buzzed and flickered, throwing weird green light on the cracked asphalt. 2 ancient pumps stood out front, looking like they hadn't been touched since the Reagan era. And the building itself? Man, it was straight out of a bad horror movie. Peeling paint, boarded up windows, and just enough light inside to see there was someone at the counter. I pulled up to the pump, killed the engine, and stepped out. The air was heavy, too quiet. Even the woods were dead silent. I hate that kind of silence. I glanced inside the station. There was an old man sitting behind the counter, staring at nothing. His face looked wrong, pale with deep-set eyes that seemed to sink into his skull. "Evening," I called, trying to sound normal. He didn't move. "Hello?" I said louder. Finally, he snapped his head up like he'd been startled awake. Except his eyes didn't look sleepy. They looked scared. He stared at me for a long moment, then raised his hand slowly like he was waving me inside. Now, I've seen enough movies to know this was a bad idea, but I wasn't about to drive off with an empty tank. So, against every instinct screaming at me to leave, I opened the door. The place smelled like wet wood and something metallic, like rust or blood. The flickering fluorescent light made everything look worse. Dusty shelves, warped floorboards, and a counter that looked sticky even from a distance. The old man didn't say a word as I walked up. His hands were flat on the counter, nails yellow and cracked. He stared at me, unblinking. "Pump 3, I said, trying to sound casual. Still nothing. Then, finally, he muttered, "You shouldn't have come here." I frowned. I just need gas, man." He shook his head slowly like I'd just told him I planned to walk off a cliff. "The pumps don't work. They haven't worked in years. You've got enough gas to leave. Just go." I stared at him, not sure if he was messing with me. "Dude, I'm running on fumes. Can you just—" "No," he snapped, his voice suddenly sharp. His eyes darted to the window, then back to me. "It's out there. It comes when people stay too long." "What comes?" I asked, my stomach doing flips. "Doesn't matter, just leave. Don't look at it if you see it. It can't follow you if you don't look." Okay, so now I'm officially freaked out. I backed toward the door, mumbling something like, "All right, sure, whatever you say," and hurried back to my car. The second I got inside, I locked the doors. My hands were shaking, but I jammed the key into the ignition and turned it. Nothing. "Come on," I whispered, trying again. The engine sputtered, coughed, and died. That's when I saw it. At first, it was just a shape, something shifting in the shadows near the tree line. I squinted, hoping my eyes were playing tricks on me. They weren't. It stepped into the light, and I swear my heart stopped. It was tall, too tall, and its limbs were all wrong. Long, thin, and jerky, like it didn't quite know how to move like a normal thing. It stopped just at the edge of the light from the neon sign. Its head tilted like it was trying to figure me out. And then I remembered what the old man said. Don't look at it. I squeezed my eyes shut, my breath coming in shallow gasps. But then I heard it. Gravel crunching under slow, deliberate footsteps. It was circling the car. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I tried not to look, but the curiosity, or maybe the fear, got the better of me. I opened my eyes just a sliver. Big mistake. Its face was blank. Just smooth, pale skin stretched over a skull. No eyes, no nose, nothing. But then, oh God, it smiled. The skin split like paper, revealing rows of jagged, uneven teeth. It wasn't a smile meant for anything good. I froze, staring at it, unable to move. The thing crouched, its head tilting again, and then it pressed one of its long, bony hands against the hood of my car. The metal groaned under its weight, and that's when I snapped out of it. I slammed my hand on the horn, hoping to scare it off. The sound shattered the silence, and the thing recoiled, its smile disappearing. It stood there for a moment, staring, or whatever the hell it was doing, before slinking back into the woods. I didn't wait to see if it would come back. I tried the ignition again, and by some miracle, the car roared to life. I peeled out of there so fast I almost hit one of the pumps. I didn't stop until I reached a motel just outside Indianapolis. I locked the door, shoved a chair under the handle, and sat in the corner of the room until morning. The next day, I told a friend about the station. He laughed it off, said there wasn't any gas station out there. I didn't believe him, so I went back a week later. He was right. The place was gone. Nothing but an overgrown lot, as if it had never been there at all. I don't know what I saw that night, and honestly, I don't want to know. All I know is this. If you're ever driving through the middle of nowhere and you see a gas station that doesn't quite feel right, don't stop. Story number 2, by William. This happened a few years ago when I was driving through western Montana. I was on a solo road trip, the kind you take to clear your head. Miles of empty highway, nothing but you and the hum of your engine. It was peaceful until it wasn't. I was on Route 2, somewhere between Libby and Kalispell, when I realized I was running low on gas. My GPS said there was a station about 5 miles ahead. I didn't think much of it. These small, middle-of-nowhere gas stations always looked run down, so when I pulled into Wilson's service, I didn't bat an eye. The place was ancient. The pumps had those spinning dials instead of digital screens, and the sign above the store was so faded you could barely read it. A single bulb flickered above the entrance, and a couple of moths smacked into it like they had nowhere else to be. It was late, around 11 p.m., and the lot was empty except for an old Ford pickup parked by Pump 5. Its rusted body looked like it hadn't moved in years. I pulled up to Pump 2, stepped out, and grabbed the nozzle. That's when I noticed the guy sitting in the truck. He was slouched back in the driver's seat, wearing a dirty baseball cap pulled low over his face. At first, I didn't think much of him. Probably just some local taking a break. But then I realized he wasn't moving. Not at all. "All right, don't psych yourself out," I muttered, forcing my focus back to the pump. I squeezed the handle. Nothing. I checked the screen. It said to see the cashier. Of course, I sighed. I glanced at the truck again as I walked toward the store. The guy was still there, perfectly still. Too still. The bell above the door jingled as I stepped inside. The place smelled like grease and stale coffee. Behind the counter was a woman, probably in her 60s, with thick glasses and a cigarette dangling from her lips. "Pump 2 isn't working," I said. She didn't look up from her crossword. "Flip the lever on the side." I frowned. "What lever?" She sighed like I was the dumbest person on earth. The little metal lever on the pump. Gotta flip it up first. Okay, thanks, I said, turning to leave. But as I reached the door, she called out, "You driving that car out by pump 2? "Yeah." Her eyes narrowed. "You come here alone?" I hesitated. "Yeah." "Why?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked over to the window, her cigarette dangling precariously from her lips, and peered out into the lot. "You didn't see him, did you?" she asked quietly. "See who?" Her gaze locked on the truck by pump 5. "That man. He's not supposed to be here." Now, I'm not the type to scare easily, but the way she said it sent a chill down my spine. "What do you mean?" I asked. She shook her head. "Just finish up and get out to here. Don't look at him and don't talk to him." At this point, my stomach was doing flips, but I nodded and left. Outside, the air felt heavier. I walked back to my car, keeping my head down, but as I passed pump 5, I couldn't help it. I glanced at the truck. The guy was sitting up now, staring straight ahead. No, not at ahead. At me. His eyes were wrong. Too wide, too shiny, like he wasn't blinking. His mouth was slightly open, and there was something about the way he sat. Too stiff, too unnatural, like he was being held up by strings. I hurried back to my car and flipped the lever on the pump, my hands shaking. The gas started flowing and I kept my eyes locked on the nozzle, refusing to look back at the truck. But then I heard it, a door creaking open. "Hey there," a voice drawled behind me. I froze. It was him. "Need some help?" he asked, his voice slow and deliberate, like he was savoring each word. "I'm good," I said quickly, not turning around. He laughed, low and guttural, like he knew something I didn't. "Funny. Haven't seen anyone around here in a long time, not alive anyway." My heart felt like it was trying to claw its way out of my chest. I forced myself to stay calm, focused on the sound of the gas flowing. "Just fill the tank and leave," I told myself. But then I felt it. A presence. Close. Too close. "You're not from around here, are you?" he asked, his voice now right behind me. "No," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. The gas pump clicked, signaling the tank was full. I yanked the nozzle out, slammed it back onto the pump, and got into my car without looking back. As I started the engine, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The truck was gone. I didn't stop driving until I hit Kalispell. I pulled into a diner, shaking so bad I could barely hold my coffee. Later, I tried looking up the gas station. There was no Wilson service on Route 2. No records of it, no mentions online. And that truck? It wasn't parked in the lot when I left. I don't know who or what that man was. But if you're ever out on those empty Montana roads and you see a rusted truck at a gas station, don't stop. Whatever's in there, it's waiting for you to make the first move. Story number 3, by Grace. It's funny how a single moment can make you question everything you've ever known. My name's, well, just call me Anonymous. What I'm about to tell you isn't dressed in supernatural exaggeration or Hollywood-style drama. It's raw, it's unsettling, and it happened in a place as mundane as a gas station. We were heading back from a long weekend trip to the Smoky Mountains. The plan was simple: drive from Tennessee back home to Louisville, Kentucky, in one shot. My buddy Ethan was passed out in the passenger seat, his head tilted against the window, snoring softly. It was one of those rare, quiet nights where the sky seemed to stretch on forever. We had been on the road for hours, and the digital clock on the dashboard blinked 2:37 a.m. when the gas light came on. Figures. I wasn't exactly keen on stopping in the middle of nowhere, but it was either find a gas station or end up stranded on some dark highway. About 10 minutes later, I saw the glowing red and white sign of a gas station off Route 25. It looked like it had been there for decades. Faded paint, a single flickering streetlight, and one lonely pump. The kind of place where you'd expect to see a mechanic shop attached, but there wasn't. Ethan woke up as I pulled in. "Where are we?" he mumbled, rubbing his eyes. "Middle of nowhere," I replied, cutting the engine. "We need gas." The place had that eerie, too quiet vibe. No other cars, no attendants, just the hum of the fluorescent lights. But it was open, 24 hours apparently. So I swiped my card at the pump and started filling up. That's when I noticed her. She was sitting on the curb, right under the flickering light. A woman, maybe in her late 30s, with greasy blonde hair and a ratty coat that looked 2 sizes too big. She wasn't doing anything, just sitting there staring at her hands. I've always been the kind of person who keeps to himself, but something about her made me uneasy. She didn't seem drunk or high, just off, like she was waiting for something or someone. Ethan got out of the car, stretching. "Man, I need to pee. Is the bathroom open?" I shrugged. "Probably inside." He walked toward the building and I called after him, "Don't take too long." As I stood there watching the numbers tick up on the pump, the woman suddenly looked up. Her eyes locked onto mine and I swear I felt a chill run down my spine. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice flat, almost robotic. "Excuse me?" I said, genuinely caught off guard. She stood up, brushing the dirt off her coat. "This place... bad things happen here. You should go." I glanced toward the building where Ethan had disappeared. "Look, lady, I just need gas. We'll be out of here in 5 minutes." She didn't say anything else, just turned and started walking down the road. I watched her until she disappeared into the darkness. When the pump clicked, signaling the tank was full, I realized Ethan hadn't come back yet. I checked my phone. No signal. Typical. I walked toward the building, pushing open the glass door. The place was as run down inside as it was outside. A single counter with a cash register, shelves half-stocked with snacks, and a small sign that said restroom, pointing to a hallway in the back. "Ethan," I called out. No response. I walked down the hallway, past an ancient-looking soda machine, to the bathroom door. It was slightly ajar. "Ethan, you good?" I asked, pushing the door open. The bathroom was empty. Now, Ethan's the kind of guy who'd pull a prank just to mess with me, but something about this didn't feel right. I checked the stalls, the storage closet. Nothing. "Ethan, this isn't funny," I shouted, my voice echoing off the tiled walls. I stepped back into the hallway and that's when I noticed it. A pair of muddy boot prints leading from the bathroom down to the back exit. The door was slightly open, creaking as the wind pushed against it. I hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open. The outside was pitch black, the only light coming from the gas station behind me. "Ethan," I called again, stepping out. The gravel crunched under my feet as I walked around the side of the building. That's when I saw it. A truck parked behind the gas station. It was old, rusted, and had no plates. The driver's door was open and the interior light was on. I could see a bunch of junk inside. Tools, beer cans, a filthy blanket. And then I saw Ethan's shoe. It was lying on the ground next to the truck. My heart started racing. I looked around, but there was no sign of him. "Ethan!" I yelled, panic creeping into my voice. I heard a noise, a faint shuffling sound, coming from the woods behind the gas station. Now, I'm not the bravest guy in the world, but I wasn't about to leave my best friend. I grabbed a flashlight from the car and followed the noise. The woods were dense, the kind of place where the trees seemed to close in around you. I could hear my own breathing, loud and ragged, as I scanned the ground for any sign of Ethan. About 50 feet in, I found his other shoe, and then I heard it, a low, guttural moan. "Ethan," I called, my voice barely above a whisper. The moan turned into a scream. I ran toward the sound, tripping over roots and branches. The flashlight beam bounced wildly, casting long, twisted shadows. When I reached the source of the noise, I froze. Ethan was tied to a tree, his hands bound behind his back with duct tape. His face was pale, his eyes wide with terror. "Help!" he gasped. "He's still here!" Before I could react, I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around, flashlight in hand, and saw him. A man, tall and wiry, with a scraggly beard and wild eyes. He was holding a crowbar, his knuckles white as he gripped it tightly. "Who the hell are you?" I demanded, trying to sound braver than I felt. The man didn't answer. He just stared at me, his head tilted slightly, like he was sizing me up. "Let him go," I said, my voice shaking. The man smiled, a crooked, unsettling smile, and took a step forward. That's when I did the only thing I could think of. I swung the flashlight at his face as hard as I could. The impact sent him stumbling back, and I didn't waste any time. I pulled out my pocket knife and cut Ethan loose. "Run!" I yelled. We bolted through the woods, the sound of the man's footsteps close behind. I could hear him cursing, shouting threats, but I didn't look back. When we burst out of the woods and into the gas station parking lot, I saw the woman again. She was standing by the pump, watching us. "Go!" she shouted. "Now!" We didn't need to be told twice. We jumped into the car and I floored it, gravel spraying as we sped out of there. As we drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The man was standing in the middle of the road, the crowbar hanging limply at his side. The woman was gone. We didn't stop until we reached a diner on the outskirts of Lexington. We sat there, shaking, sipping lukewarm coffee, trying to make sense of what had happened. We called the cops, but when they went to check the gas station, there was no sign of the man or the woman. The only thing they found was Ethan's wallet, lying in the woods where the truck had been. To this day, I don't know who that man was or what he wanted, but every time I see a gas station in the middle of nowhere, I feel that chill all over again. Sometimes the scariest things aren't ghosts or monsters. Sometimes it's just the dark corners of humanity that make your blood run cold. You've reached the end of this haunting stop, but the road to terror stretches far ahead. Don't leave without fueling up. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join us for the next chilling encounter. The darkness is always watching. Will you be ready?